This time, no, not the Mind Probe, episode number 90. I'm so excited that it's episode number 90.
Woo!
And it's called...
Welcome to the Mind Probe. It's a French Mind Probe.
yes. Wait.
And for the benefit of those who listen to that introduction, it's called It's All Relative.
I don't know. I don't know why something just struck me funny. I have no explanation. It's just very funny to me all of a sudden.
It's the William Conrad Fridge.
We have fun.
We've got a case of the sillies on No, Not the Mind Probe. And we're going to France, which is why I did that ridiculous accent.
You mean, sorry, to be clear, in the plot line of this episode, you and I are not doing some like tour of France where we'll be doing signings and stuff like that.
It would be great if, for no readily apparent reason, inexplicably, why are you showing us the TARDIS? Just
I'm just
doing color correction
with the focus on the camera. By the way, check us out on YouTube at Mind Probe Show, or search for No Not the Mind Probe, and then scroll past the 3 actual No Not the Mind Probe clips, and we're there. You can watch all these new podcasts on our YouTube. By the way, John. By the way, your name is John, and this is a podcast.
Segues. Well, I was talking about our French tour. I was planning our French tour, which I think would be great if we just went to France and then just acted like we were really well known and famous, and just kept having events in random little French towns.
Couldn't we do that if we did that? Couldn't we do that thing where we wrote it off? Like, isn't that a thing where we can? And you could just throw that credit card into the sea or something and never pay for it. Like,
apparently, if you write things off, they're free, and you may even make money. I don't understand. I understand. Those are the kinds of things I would love to learn on some sort of money advice podcast, which is not what this is. There it is. And
then people immediately turn this podcast off. I wanted to listen to a 15
Susie Orman
money advice podcast instead of just, like spending a little less and saving a little more. I need more podcasts. Only if I had podcasts.
I just hope there's actually one person who's been listening for 90 episodes and is like, wait, so Suze Orman is not coming on this. Damn it.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, this podcast, if you're still listening, which at this point is amazing, this podcast is one where we watch and rank every single Doctor Who story ever that has ever happened or ever will.
Ever.
Yes, we will not stop. Even if we are forced to by the government, we will find a way. We'll go work on an oil rig, one of those underground pirate radio stations.
Sure.
Because the 5 people who listen to this podcast need to hear it to completion. I get it.
I'll work on an oil rig just in preparation. I'll just get out there, get into the union or whatever's needed, and learn the trade. Of course, I'm going to be serious about it. I'm not just going to
you should. Because... And you know what? I was trying to segue into my name, but I lost it. So my name is John Grant, though.
Yes.
I do know that. I've been watching. I'm a lifelong Doctor Who fan. I've been watching it for 38 amazing years.
My name is Porter Mason. I've been investing in index funds for 26 years, and then I put 20% of my income into savings. Now, discretionary income, and this is important, John. You spend too much discretionary income on Doctor Who. That's the main point of this podcast, is to try to get John's spending on Doctor Who down.
Yeah, by watching more of it. And I thought we were going to monetize this podcast.
Oh yeah, we are.
When is that happening?
Well, it's a long game. What we're doing right now is we're building up a treasure chest of content. Okay.
And memories.
Then we're going to sell the rights to those memories to a large conglomerate, probably overseas. They're going to have to translate all this into Mandarin. And then the money's really going to start rolling in.
Yeah, it's the Chinese market where we're really expecting to explode, I think.
Well, right now, we're in that early stage of Netflix where we're just putting a lot of energy and money into just getting as much original content out there as possible. Now, for us, that means 90 episodes of this one podcast.
Yeah. But it's way better. At least we have moved on from your original idea for this podcast was we were actually just going to mail out CDs of it to people.
That's
And then
right.
they would listen and return them as a subscriber service. And I'm glad we moved away from that into this digital format.
I'm not totally sold on this digital thing. I still think that I still regularly just throw CDs out of my house. Do you remember how many CDs came in the mail 20 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
AOL CDs. People like I'm sure
you just get free CDs in the mail. Yeah, CD-ROMs would just show up.
So
yeah,
I'm sure you get plenty of direct mail, junk mail now. But back in the day, you would just get CDs, and as a kid, it was fun because then you could just like play with them and like break them and mess with them because they were worthless CDs that were being sent to you for AOL that you already had. So I don't know.
And then if you remember of Columbia House, you would just get tapes that you didn't want would be forced upon you.
That's
and
right.
You had to send them back, or they were going to charge you money. It was a weird time.
Each episode of this Life in the 90s podcast, we look at 2 Doctor Who stories. We are going through the new Doctor Who series in order. We're just started the 12th Doctor years, and then John acts as our Doctor Who sommelier. He brings his immense amount of Doctor Who knowledge to bear, and finds a perfect pairing of the story, which I'm sure in this case, John also just listen, and then just a perfect pairing with listen.
Yeah, similar themes, similar dialogue, similar characters. Really, 2 peas in a pod. Really, yeah. We're moving on in the Peter Capaldi, Jenna Coleman years here. The 12th Doctor years, with the very different Listen by Stephen Moffat. A very oddball Doctor Who story that takes some big swings and some kind of significant moments, really, especially towards the end there. And so I've paired that with, and now stay with me here. Paired that with a First Doctor Steven story where the First Doctor is really not even in it that much.
But there's probably a lot of there's some horror elements and maybe some.
Nope. It is a deadly serious dramatization of a moment in French history that no one has ever heard of, except French people probably. It's but what happens here is in Listen we meet a future offspring of a present day character, and in the Massacre at the very end we meet a future offspring of a character from the present day of that story, and so that was the link. And I know it seems tenuous, but I think you got to give me a lot of credit for finding that link. I mean, that is.
All right, we're going to recap these episodes, John, by hook or by crook. Listen is the title of the new episode. And by the way, I like this because he just writes the title of the episode down on a blackboard several times throughout the show. So
the very first line is him just on the side of the house going, listen. Yeah.
In his Scottish brogue.
Yeah, he's got his great voice.
So we are at story number 4. This is the 4th Peter Capaldi story ever. Series 8. We got the 12th Doctor. We got Clara. When we have, as you mentioned, Danny Pink checking back in.
Clocking in.
And you're saying he's going to become a regular, might even become a companion.
He's a regular.
Is that happening now? Or because he hasn't stepped onto the TARDIS yet. That hasn't happened.
No. And that's going to become part of the storyline. But yes, he's becoming, he's like Rory, but not. But we don't get quite as much Rory coming on board right as quickly. Yeah.
All right. So let's play a clip from Listen that John has prepared for us.
Where is he?
Doctor?
I can't find him. Can you find him?
Find who?
Wally.
Wally?
He's nowhere in this book.
It's not a Where's Wally one.
Well, how would you know? Maybe you just haven't found him yet.
He's not in every book.
Really? Well, that's a few years of my life I've been needing back. Are you scared? The thing on the bed, whatever it is, look at it. Does it scare you?
Yes.
Well, that's good. You want to know why that's good?
Why?
Let me tell you about scared. Your heart is beating so hard. I can feel it through your hands. There's so much blood and oxygen pumping through your brain. It's like rocket fuel. Right now, you could run faster and you could fight harder. You could jump higher than ever in your life. And you are so alert. It's like you can slow down time. What's wrong with scared? Scared is a superpower. It's your superpower. There is danger in this room, and guess what? It's you. Do you feel it?
Ooh, good monologue.
Monologue from there.
Repeated at the end of the episode.
Yeah, where did he get it from? And apparently Wally, apparently only in the U.S. is it Waldo. Everywhere else in the world, it's Where's Wally?
Wow.
So he's looking for Waldo in the book.
What country did that start in, I wonder?
I have no idea. I mean, well, maybe Denmark. I don't know. He was wearing a little hat with a little pump, and maybe like something's Nordic or something.
Right. I don't think I mentioned this is story number 245. It aired the 13th of September 2014, and it's Clara as well as Danny Pink and the Doctor. So I'll break down what I got from this episode, but I feel like it was an interesting episode. So first of all, it started off as kind of one of the more like horror flavored episodes of it, where it was literally the Doctor saying, wait, I think I'm onto something. I think that feeling when you feel like you're not alone, it's so universal. We have dreams about it, and he relays a particular dream about someone grabbing your leg from underneath the bed, which I have not ever had that dream. Have you ever had
I was just going to ask you. I was going to ask you that too, because like, hey, we've all had that dream. I was like,
I've never had that. I've certainly had lots of different senses where you feel like you're not alone and things like that.
Something
like,
under the bed. Of course, there's a common childhood fear, certainly, right? That there's
and
a
we
monster
all have are skittish about noise. Like literally, that's how we evolved, to be very skittish little mammals. That was selected for, because if you were skittish, it's like when you do testing. If you get a false positive on that, it's really not a problem. Right. If you get a false negative and you don't notice a predator coming up to eat you, then you die, and your genes don't continue on.
And of course, we've all had the experience. We've all had a serial killer under our bed. I mean, I had that twice when I was a kid. It was, in the same 2 weeks, it was annoying.
Sometimes you're the serial killer. Sometimes you're the serial killee.
Yeah,
but
that
we've
song
all been
on
there.
Sesame Street. Sometimes you're the serial killer. It's one of my favorites.
Well, anyway, he's saying, I think, and I don't know that it's not communicated why he's having this revelation, but you just see him in the moment of this revelation saying, I think it's true. I think I'm onto something. There is actually something there.
He logics his way into it. Yeah.
So, okay. So he interrupts Clara, who's finally going on the date that we saw about 2 episodes ago, where she agreed. And they mention on the date that it wasn't just us having 2 episodes. They clearly had to play some calendar tag, and they didn't have the date right after. Okay, but they're finally sitting down to have the date.
Show, don't tell, right? I mean, show the calendar tag. You don't. I mean, this is classic writing stuff.
So they're on the date, and I think we already see them kind of having these. They're just clearly very uncomfortable. Here's the funny thing about Clara's character. I feel like I know more about Danny's character and why he might be a little nervous and in fits and starts on this date than Clara. I don't really understand why Clara is nervous, other than, generally people are nervous on dates.
That is an awkward first date, right?
No, I know. I get it. I just mean, I think it's funny because I feel like we know more about Danny's life, which is just to say it's been referenced that he's a soldier and clearly went through some things with it, but also clearly is like fighting against what people everyone seems to know he's a soldier and puts things onto him. And we just already know that's the thing about him. I know nothing about Clara's life. Like, I just don't know any other than the changes of like, you are a nanny teacher who does live but does not live with the family.
Who had a family that you were totally devoted to, but then was never mentioned again.
You have these kids who you are like a second mother to, who we will never see again. Anyway, so they're on their date, and the Doctor interrupts.
Well, no. She goes home. Remember the first? She goes. She goes
home.
Out of the date. Yeah.
The date was bad, partly because she got into the soldier thing, but there's a bunch of other things. And then he says, come on. He's so excited. Come on. I have something with this.
I've had an idea.
I have an idea. So I need you to, your mind is going to guide the TARDIS. And
by the way, he has a great joke where she comes back and he's in her bedroom and the TARDIS is parked in her bedroom. And she's like, I told you I was on a date. And he said, yeah, I thought it might have gone well. And if he came back here, I was hiding so he wouldn't find me. So I hid in your bedroom.
Right.
Very
and I was just like, oh, you already taken the makeup off? She's like, no. Doesn't he make a comment in here, or is it later when he talks about like
her giant eyes,
and her enormously wide face? And I really love it because she's Yes, she's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I love the things he finds to joke about her, to make fun of, because they are genuinely true. She does have a very wide face and like enormous eyes, which it is attractive, but it's funny that he picks on it. Anyway, so it gets into this like, hey, you're pulling. Oh, Danny calls. No. Okay. So
Yes,
the doctor says, I'm going to hook you up to
Fingers
the
in the
TARDIS.
thing.
The TARDIS
Yeah.
is going to follow your mental model. I want you to think about the moments when you're, feel like you're not alone.
You had that dream. Yeah.
That dream, and we're going to kind of investigate it and see if we can get into it. But Danny calls at that moment and he's like, no, you can't take it. And then so we travel somewhere.
Mhm.
And again, this is where it starts to feel like creepy. It's this house. We go into this kid. It's like a
Children's home.
group
Yeah.
home of some
Yeah.
sort. He's staying, but there's no one else there. So it's like we're in a memory or something. And does she get right away that it's Danny or not?
Let's see, she's outside the window and he says his name and she's worried it's Danny.
He says it's
then
Rupert.
He says it's Rupert and she's like, but then she's like Rupert Pink and she's like, she's not 100% sure, but she goes up and then it's only later where she really gets the connect.
So anyway, we have this whole story where the kid's very scared of something on the bed and Claire's kind of trying to tell him nothing's there. But then ultimately something does seem to be on the bed and comes up creepily in a sheet. It's very horror-y. The doctor appears and basically says to them, he comes in with this sort of brash confidence and is saying like, just ignore this and whatever. But then is saying like, oh no, I have no idea what's going on. This is scary and I don't know what that is. Or he's saying it could be nothing.
Right. It could be a kid from down the hall.
Or not. Those are her two options. And it gets into this thing. I thought we were going to get back into the angels because it was this thing of like turn away from it and then
ignore it, right? His argument is like, all right, remember, he's working on the theory that it's a perfect hider. He says like that, right? Perfect hiding.
Then we'd never know.
And so we'd never know, which is logically not impossible. And then he says, okay, well, what would happen if something was like that and then you suddenly saw it? Like, that would be very dangerous, probably. So he's like, let's pretend we don't see it, and then it will eventually go away.
Yeah, and the speech you just played, I really loved it. It's something I actually want to say to my daughters. I really like the idea of saying like, hey, when you're scared, that's actually great. You are so ready to handle whatever is happening because like if you're scared, you literally have superpowers. I thought that was great.
And they're like, Daddy, the house is on fire. Could we do this outside? And you're like, no. This is important.
This is a teaching moment. And what was interesting too, because immediately after that point, he gets very like, no, don't coddle the kid. Don't say this to him. Tell him really what's happening. Tell him the problems or whatever. But in that speech,
like, no.
he's being so great with the kid. And then he immediately kind of switches back. Anyway, so at the end of that sequence, we also see like, oh, we're going to set up these little army men. They're going to protect you. And then we get to it's like, oh, this is the defining moment that sort of made Danny want to become a soldier later. And there's a particular one that they leave that she's like, this is the colonel, he's in charge. And so that becomes important later. The interesting thing was I wasn't really paying attention to the time. I thought we were getting to the end of this sequence and they get through it. We still don't know what this thing is or if it was a thing. Clara says, I need you to do something for me. And she's like, take me back. She basically goes back to the moment in the restaurant where she left and like, I'm going to walk back in and finish the date.
Yep.
It still doesn't go well.
No.
Because among other things, the main thing that sets it off is she slips and says Rupert, which there's no way she would know this. And from Danny's reaction, he's like, I've never told anyone my name. So what's going on? I need to know. Thing was
like, I heard it from somebody. And then she just kind of stops and looks at it.
Yeah, that's good. So it goes poorly again. And then in the middle of that, spaceman, man in a spacesuit comes in, leaves. She assumes it's the doctor. And so when she comes back into the TARDIS, she's like, what are you doing? Don't please, can you just not come in the middle of this to the spacesuit? But it takes off the spacesuit mask. It's not the doctor. It's someone who looks just like Danny. So I was ready for the and credits. And then I happen to look at my iPad. It's like, oh, this is like halfway through the episode. I'm like, oh God. Okay. So then a whole nother plot starts, in a way. I mean, I just mean this is a whole second act to the story where, okay, this isn't Danny. This is, we think, it's not totally clear, but his great grandkid or something like that.
Yeah.
We find that it's the same. We're saying it's Danny. It's the same actor, but
Yes.
and what we find out is that this what is his name?
Orson
Is one of the first time travelers, like experimental time travel, like
Which
Apollo mission type time travel.
Do people name their kids Orson? Are there any Orson? I mean, the only Orson I know is
Orson
the one
Welles,
Mork talked to, and Orson Welles. So it was Mork calling Orson, come in, Orson. And
I guess it's not common anymore. Yeah,
and then Orson Welles.
That's a good name. That's I see that making a comeback.
Or what would you call Ors? Hey, Ors.
Orzo,
Short,
like
Ors.
the pasta.
Kids love pasta.
So that is very true. So yeah, he was like, again, a Mercury astronaut version of the time traveler. He was sent forward, and basically the doctor says, like, yeah, when that happened, sometimes it worked, and sometimes they ended up at the end of the universe.
Yeah.
So he ended up on this planet at the end of the universe, which I want to come back to because we've already been to the end of the universe, and this is different. So I don't know if that matches up, but
it ends a lot of different ways.
Okay. And on this end of the universe, it's basically like he's the last man. He's the last being standing. Like he's here at the end. There's nothing else is alive. He's been there for 6 months. He's been marooned.
Yeah.
And the doctor says, like, he says, oh, great, you can take me back to where I, started. Because again, he was only supposed to go a week ahead in time. You can take me back to my time and place. And the doctor says, you're lying. You're very scared here. And he thinks, and he realizes that Orson thinks that there's something else there, and there's all these clues about it. So it's like, oh, it's back to this childhood trauma. It's like, but it's sort of odd because it's like, but this isn't Danny. So this is like, is it a generational trauma?
Well, remember the doctor's thinking
is that everyone has this,
right? And so he just keeps chasing down. So I think he says something like he dropped Clara off and then was still obsessed with this idea, looking for these things, and thought, okay, maybe Rupert's timeline will somehow lead him to that thing, right? In the same way he was hoping Clara's would, but anyway, Rupert's timeline led him to the grandkid or whatever, right? So yeah, he's still chasing those things, and then when he gets there, he's like, oh, this is perfect. There is supposedly nothing else in the entire universe. So now would be the time that these things would be like, yay, we're free. We don't have to hide anymore. Right. I can see them.
So Orson's like, that sounds great. I'll be staying in the TARDIS.
Yeah. I'm just gonna pack my stuff up.
Clara and the doctor say, we're gonna, it's the equivalent of, we're gonna stay up all night. It's like a sleepover thing. It's like, we're gonna stay up all night and see if Santa comes. So they stay out all night. So then these things happen that you can maybe explain or not. I don't know. Maybe they're not explained. So they stay out in the space station or whatever, his ship, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, man. Pod.
And they start to hear noises, just like you would, like noises under the bed. But then they are real noises and like pounding. And then the lock starts to turn and open. And the doctor says, I need you, Clara, go inside the TARDIS. And she's like, no, I'm staying here with you. And you'll remember the line, but he says something to her like, you have to listen to me. Or,
you have to listen to me now. So that's part of the deal or something on these. You have to,
like, I don't just take orders from you or I don't know, something. So she goes inside and she's watching from the TV, the monitor. And then the door does open, meaning the
depressurized.
It's depressurized. The air is flowing out. So then Danny goes out. I'm sorry. Orson goes out and saves the doctor, brings him back in, and then Clara just like he's back in, so the doctor's kind of unconscious.
Yes, he's unconscious.
So Clara's like, we just need to get out of here, wherever we are.
Yeah, and she puts her hands in the thing.
Right, so she goes in and then ends up. So Danny and the doctor Orson and the doctor stay in the ship. Clara goes out to see where they are.
Well, because, all right, so she's got her things in a thing. Remember, he's like, you have to concentrate if you're distracted. And then at one point, the doctor like has a spasm or something and sits up.
And so she's like thinking about the doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, we don't know any of that, but yes, that's happening. But so then in the scene, we're in like looks like a farmhouse.
Yeah, little barn.
And so then she slides under like a barn. And she slides under the bed. Or no, she overhears she slides under the
bed crying.
People come in. There's
coming in
the bed. And then, she kind of thinks, and we think, oh, that's Danny again, or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then people come in the room, so she slides under the bed. So we overhear this conversation. They're like, oh, he's just sitting in bed crying all the time. Well, and the male voice is like, well, he's just got to get it together. Like, we can't just comfort him all the time, kind of sounding like the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're saying, well, he's never going to be a soldier if that's what he wants. So again, it's like, oh, this is Danny.
He's
Danny.
never going to be a Time Lord.
Well,
is what he says.
but they say something right before then, and then they say that.
Yes, you go to the academy. Yes, you're right.
The academy. I'm sorry. I guess that's true.
Yeah,
I thought they said soldier. Well, at any rate,
maybe they just say something. Yes,
at any rate,
find out.
Then yes, then the conversation continues, and we hear like it's a Time Lord. So like, oh my gosh, this is the Doctor.
Yes.
As a kid,
and Jenna Coleman has some great face acting going on here. Like,
yes, her huge wide face is acting really well.
Giant eyes.
So, and then the kids that the Doctor stands up and she grabs the leg, and so it's a really great little moment of like, oh, that's funny that like he has this thing of this dream, and this actually happened to him, but it was Clara. Again, she's threaded throughout every moment of the Doctor's life.
I do have to say it was of the things that happened in this, that was a fantastically written and directed moment, because
yes,
inevitably you only after you don't expect it. Like even when she goes under the bed,
just ahead of you,
didn't expect it.
Just ahead of you.
Then he puts his legs down, and then and it's done so well because you're as surprised as she is, and you realize at the same moment she does, you're like, oh, it's really well done.
And
I thought.
I don't know if they thought about this, but gotta assume they did because of how it worked. That's partly helped by she was under the bed with kid Danny in the other scene as just part of the scene. So when she's under the bed, you're not thinking of that. Like that's not,
Yeah,
it's more that
she's under everyone's bed. She's Clara. She's under everyone's bed.
Well, wouldn't that be nice if like the monster under your bed was Clara Oswald? Like, well, that's fine. Like,
I'm sure when you were probably a 16-year-old teen boy.
That's true. So okay, so it's him. She actually talks to the Doctor, and she's like, "Get in the bed." I don't know why that was sort of funny, because then he gets in, falls asleep, I guess, which I find confusing that he would finally be able to fall asleep. And then she kind of talks to him.
She comforts him. Yeah.
She gets back on the ship, on the TARDIS, and says, "I'm not telling you where we are. You just need to leave."
She kind of gives the same thing back to him. Yeah.
Right. And then they do, and then that's kind of it. Like it just sort of ends. So
she gives him a hug.
Gives him a hug. Oh yeah, he's like, no hugging. But yeah, I found this really fascinating, confusing in a good way. Of like, I need to watch that again. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
And like I said, it really felt like two, and in some ways, because the last bit with the Doctor, kind of like 3 different episodes. Like it was very packed.
Yeah.
Episode.
Yeah, I think so. It's Stephen Moffat. I think so. A couple sort of starting points for him. One, he said he's like, "Oh, I'd like to actually prove I could still write," like, which is ridiculous for him to say, but he's like he'd been doing like these big sort of grand adventure stories or whatever, and he's like, "I'd really like to do a chamber piece again, like a small, character driven thing like that." And then he was trying to think of where to start, and I guess he was like, "Well, what if you're the Doctor? What would you do when you're alone? What would happen to you when you're alone?" And he's like, "You probably develop these obsessions," which is sort of what that whole opening thing is about. And I think this is one that is worth rewatching, because if you go back through it again, it is done in a way that the intent is for you to say there could actually be no monster, right? So he's come up with this idea, he's become obsessed with, and I actually think that's the point. I think there is no monster. I think he's become obsessed with this idea, and then now he's seeing it, everything he's filling in, right? Like every single thing that happens, and you see it in the scene at the end where he and Clara are sitting there and the noises are happening and stuff like that, and he's like, well, that could be the engines doing a thing, and that could be the temperature settling, and like all of these things, and the thing on the bed could have just been a kid playing a prank, and like and you even see it's even for sort of hinted at in remember he meets the guy that runs the children's home or whatever, and he's like, you put something down and it's not there again, like your coffee cup or something, and then the guy turns around and then turns back around and the Doctor's gone and the coffee cup is gone, but then the next scene he just sips the coffee like the Doctor stole it or whatever. And it's even, and this is again why Stephen Moffat is a brilliant writer, even that clip, that joke about "Where's Wally?" Of the Doctor being like, "I've been looking for him in every book I've ever read." And he's like, "Well, that's years of my life." And the kid's like, "He's not in every book." And he's like, "Well, that's years of my life gone." Right? Even that is sort of
relates
commenting on this, right? So yeah, I think the idea is like this is sort of a musing on obsession, and what would the Doctor do in this situation? And so yeah, everything has an explanation, and then I guess you see the end, you have it like Clara, it's not a nightmare. The thing grabbing your ankle under the bed is not a nightmare. It really happens to him, right? So there was a thing under the bed. I think
Is it truly a common dream? We both
I
said
don't
we've never
know.
had it.
Again, I don't know. I've never had it. I'm trying to. I mean, the common dreams I have are. I still have dreams where I can't. I'm supposed to. The most common dream I have is actually that I'm supposed to be taking a. I haven't finished my credits for college, or it's like I missed. I haven't been to a class for an entire semester. And I need to take an exam. Like that's my common. That's my common dream.
I used to have a really common nightmare, but of just like which in different forms. I think is kind of just being chased.
Yeah. Chase is definitely-
Mine was I was being chased down like a sewer, like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, like New York sewer by dogs. Like it was a recurring nightmare when I was little. But I haven't had it in years.
Then do you confront the dogs at the end of the storm pipe, and then you're like, "I didn't kill my wife," and they're like, "We don't care."
It really looks like that. Yes, the fugitive storm pipe. Yes, that's what it is. I don't, and the dogs go, "I don't care." Yes,
this is Peter Capaldi giving a great performance, I think, in this one, and sort of playing this obsession character, and like you said, the mercurial, like really good with the kid at one point, and then shifting to being very like it's not a shift, like in a way, like it's like he's telling the kid what the kid needs to hear to get through that moment.
Yeah.
And then, at the next moment, it's like the moment's passed. Now just be honest with the kid, right? And he's like, we don't need to, and Clara's like, no, you idiot. We have to do that.
And nothing he's saying about fear, it is kind of meant to pump the kid up and move past the situation, but he's not lying to him. It's all true.
No, it's right. True. Right. He's very direct. Interesting that we were talking about this last episode of our show, which we recorded, I can't even remember.
Weeks
ago. But I think finally Jenna Coleman and Clara are getting some character here, right? I think there's a lot going on, right? She's, her we've known in the past her ability to connect with children and the compassion with them, and that fantastic scene of her talking to Rupert, and she like dives under the bed to prove to him that it's safe. I think the entire date going on with Danny, there's a lot of great moments there, and like her, she's kind of being flippant at one point, and then suddenly like he says something about her and she reacts very strongly to that, and then you get her afterwards, the reaction after that. You've got I read one review actually, and I agree with this. It's a kind of impressive performance between her and Danny, in that she, obviously Danny and Orson are the same actor. It's heavily implied, most likely, that Orson is a descendant of hers. And so they're like, so they both needed to play like there's no sexual tension between them.
Right.
Like, you can't be flirting with it.
Right.
And so they do a pretty good job of that. And then her confronting the doctor. This is, I think Clara starts to come into her own a lot in this episode. I thought it was a very strong performance. And I think their relationship, the Dr. Clara relationship, is finally starting to crystallize a little bit, or this newest take on it.
I agree that her performance is very strong. I would like to still just continue to, it's maybe just like an information thing. I just want to know more about her life. I'm actually just thinking back to my I liked Rose fine, but not my favorite companion. And we joked about on the show, I just felt they harped on her for a very long time. But you knew so much about Rose's world. You knew so much about her life. And we've had so few, and with Amy and Rory's too, you would go back to Earth during their, you would, like the doctor would hang along.
Well, that's where we're headed, right? So what we're going to see a lot more of this, of her life with Danny, or this developing relationship. We don't get much past, so she's still a bit of an enigma from the past, but we do start to get more of her current life, and seeing her. And there's an episode that takes place at her work, at her school coming up, stuff like that. The barn is the barn from Day of the Doctor.
Oh.
Right, there's a little flash to the War Doctor at one point. So significant place for the Doctor. This is a lot of so obviously the earliest we've never seen back in the history of the Doctor, right? Him as a child, which was, people thought this would be more controversial. I don't find it particularly, it'd be one thing if it was just like a kid dressed as a William Hartnell wig or something. You don't really see the kid or anything, or having dialogue. That's fine. But again, so she has a line where she says, "Fear makes companions of us all," which is actually a line from An Unearthly Child, the very first Doctor Who story.
Oh, wow.
He says it in the episode 3 to Ian and Barbara about when they're escaping the cavemen, or whatever. Fear makes companions of us all. So nice little loop around there. And then, also I do like, this is interesting. Again, Stephen Moffat seems to like to play with these themes, and I feel like he feels like he doesn't quite get them one time, so he tries them again to see if he can get them right. And this is even more, we saw this a little bit with Amy and Rory, but now clearly, like, Clara doesn't travel with the Doctor. He drops in on her and is like, "Hey, come on, I'm doing a thing." And
Yeah.
she's like, "How long have you been traveling by yourself?" Right? I mean, like he could have been gone for him for 20 years. And which obviously Big Finish is going to have a field day with this, but he, he's like, "Oh, I'll just drop in." And so, her like, and this is going to continue to happen too. Him just kind of popping in on her life, where it seems like a lot less. I mean, this tension will start to come to the fore, and it's happening even here. You've got Danny sort of being like, "Hey, are you lying to me? There's something you're not telling me," and she's sort of like, "You have no idea." But that's going to come to the fore here, but it seems a lot more oriented towards Clara's life is more continuity than with the Pawns, where it seemed like they were on the road with him more, whereas here it sounds like it's much more sort of pop in, pop out kind of
Yeah. No, that's true.
There you go.
All right, well, why don't we head to our classic episode?
Let's do it.
The Massacre, or The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
Yeah.
This is another missing tale. It was season 3, so we're still pretty early on.
Yeah.
Season 3, story number 5. It features the first Doctor and Stephen, and then at the very end, the last episode we discussed earlier, Dodo.
Dodo.
And what do we got? The 22nd story. It's in 4 parts from the 5th of February to the 26th of February, 1966. And John has a clip for us. I'll play that. No, here it is.
My dear Stephen, history sometimes gives us a terrible shock. And that is because we don't quite truly understand. Why should we? After all, we're all too small to realize its final pattern. Therefore, don't try and judge it from where you stand. I was right to do as I did. Yes, that I firmly believe. Even after all this time, he cannot understand. I dare not change the course of history. Well, at least I taught him to take some precautions. He did remember to look at the scanner before he opened the door. And oh God, none of them could understand. Not even my little Susan or Vicky. And as for Barbara and Chesterton, they were all too impatient to get back to their own time. Perhaps I should go back to my own planet.
Drama.
Yeah, big speech from William Hartnell.
Yeah.
And by the way, I wanted to mention, as we're seeing more of Peter Capaldi, he strikes me as this mix of, there's a lot of like Hartnell to me.
He's Hartnell's age. I mean,
right.
And they are the same age.
And he definitely still, like, he has the kind of, so it's almost like, to me, he's like Hartnell and David Tennant like mixed together. With actual Scottish accent.
Yeah.
You coward, David Tennant.
Yeah.
You coward.
They've recently recast the first Doctor with David Tennant, actually, though.
Oh, good.
So he's been playing.
That's good. I'll go through this a little, but I could only, this was another missing one. I forgot if I mentioned that in the preamble, but I was only able to listen to it on audio.
Very little remains of this one, yes.
Drift at times.
Yep.
And
there are a lot of characters.
As you mentioned, either on this episode of the podcast or when we were introducing it in the last episode that we were going to talk about this is about a period in history I know nothing about. So, and I guess it's not like I know a lot about King Richard and the Crusades, but I'm generally aware of this time period. I'm generally aware of the themes, where it's just like, I just don't know anything about it. So I found it hard to pay attention to, because I didn't, like, in some of the others, you think, I kind of know what's generally going on, right, and I can take cues, whereas this, I just don't know. So anyway, this is...
Bad guys are, yep.
They're in Paris in 1572, and there is a religious massacre of the Huguenots, which I remember hearing the Huguenots, but tensions between, wouldn't you know it, Protestants and Catholics.
Would you people just get it together?
Come on. And yeah, apparently there's this huge massacre of Huguenots, which happens during the episode. I mean, they relate to it, and basically what again, you can talk more about it. I'm honestly not going to get into all the plot, but basically they are inserted into this. He's there with Stephen.
Yeah.
They're inserted into this. They get involved with some of the characters, and then the doctor was like, we need to get out of here. This is going to happen. This massacre is going to happen. He does try to warn the one young woman of saying, like, you need to go home and you need to stay with your aunt and don't come out of your house. But Stephen's like, what? No, we have to stop. Come on. We know that there's going to be this huge massacre. We have to do something about it. He has a big speech about it. And the doctor, as you said, I don't know how much has been said actually up until this point, but it has happened at other points where they
Right.
say like, we cannot change these
Can't mess around with
moments.
history. Yeah.
These are, and he doesn't use this terminology, but it's used later. These are fixed points in time. We
Right.
can't change this. And it really frustrates Steven, and he leaves. When they get back, he's like, he just walks out, and then we hear the speech we just heard. The first Doctor to me is interesting in this episode because he feels very old, and he feels a little lost at times. And even in the speech, he feels a little, it feels like a very much an older person giving the speech of like he's regretting these things in his life. It feels like he has this depression of age.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Like it's and from what we know of the background of it, some of this was probably happening with him. He's not that old, but he's
young as the Doctor, but he's old as an actor.
Right. Yeah. And he anyway.
And I think they're still playing him as he's an old ancient being that he's clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So they really played here, and it's interesting. But yeah, there's times where he comes in and out of this, and he feels like a little confused, to be honest.
Well,
I don't know.
He's the double, right? So this is a doppelganger story, right? And so there's, he's
And then to just say, then the notable thing that it did is then Steven comes back. Dodo just like happens
wanders
in, right?
Yep,
they just pull her in because policemen are coming, and then they find out that like, oh, this is the descendant of
possibly, she has the
this
same
woman we
last
just
name.
saw, and that kind of reignites Steven.
I was like,
oh,
okay.
All right, well, aren't you a breath of fresh air?
She did live, I guess. Yeah,
right, that's true. And then he knows that, right, because when he comes out, he's like, if I don't see them alive, like what are we even doing? What are we doing here?
Right.
And then
we can't even save these people. Which is true to what like Donna and stuff I talked about too.
Do we think the Doctor knew?
No.
So that's just random?
So it's a random coincidence, and that's where it starts to fall apart. Her introduction is one of the worst companion introductions ever, which is fitting because she also is one of the worst companion exits ever, which is coming up actually in a few stories from
I thought we saw that one. No, we didn't.
We'll be seeing it soon. No, this is a Heart No Light episode. I mean, this is
he disappears.
Yeah, I mean, he goes off to look for Preslan, who's the apothecary, who's doing work on germs, I think. And so he disappears, and then the Abbot of Bambois looks exactly like him and sounds exactly like him because, of course, it is William Hartnell playing the character. And so much of the story is
convinced it's him.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I think, is sort of the crux of the story and why I enjoy it on a level, or I struggle with it. So this is a very rich, detailed historical story. There's a lot of characters, and the story is basically, if I understand it correctly, from my limited knowledge of this era, is you have France divided between Catholics and Huguenots, which are Protestants, and I believe it's I think the Queen Mother, Catherine de Medici, is is Catholic, and she's the regent for the King Charles the Ninth, who came into power young. She still wields a lot of power, and he's trying to unite the kingdom by marrying the prince to I think the princess is a Huguenot and the princess anyway, trying by marriage to unite Catholics and Protestants. And then what's going on is the Admiral de Coligny, that is a minister who is trying to get France to intervene in the Dutch Civil War, which is about so the Dutch were trying to free themselves from Spain. The Dutch very efficient. So I lived in Amsterdam for all. The Dutch very efficient because they basically had their Civil War and their War of Independence at the same time.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, they were like, let's just knock this out, everybody. So the Dutch were controlled by Spain.
And what was their Civil War over? Like tulips or something?
Yeah, exactly. They're fighting over tulips. So the Dutch were controlled by Spain, which is Catholic, and they wanted to overthrow the Spanish ruler. And so the Protestant Dutch were happy to do that, and the merchant Dutch, the sort of wealthy Amsterdammers or whatever, but then the Catholics of the Netherlands were opposing. So the Civil War was overthrowing off the Spanish ruler. The Dutch were fighting amongst themselves while also fighting Spain. And then France, the question was, does Spain intervene, or does France intervene on the side of the Dutch or the Spanish? And obviously there's the sort of back and forth with, I think, King Philip or Prince Philip, whatever, I think King Philip of France. So of Spain. So very complicated historical stuff.
Yeah.
What's interesting about it, and I think this is intentional, or if it is, it actually should be done more, I thought was kind of cool, is because this is a historic, it's not something anybody, even people in the UK are going to know a lot about.
Yeah.
So it's history like normally when you go into history, it's like the French Revolution or the something, and we all know roughly who the characters
Right.
are, right? Who the good guys and the bad guys are. Here we don't, right? Here it's Stephen kind of being thrown into it, and we think the Huguenots, I guess, are nice to him, but actually there's the one guy's kind of a jerk, and like they buy him a drink, so we're like, I guess we like Huguenots now, right? I mean, like, and Stephen is as mystified as we are, like who the good guys are and who the bad guys are.
Present day? Is he from the 60s?
No, he's from the future. So he's like
wow.
he's a space pilot from the far future. So actually, he really wouldn't understand the religious thing at all. This is by John Lucarati, who wrote the Aztecs, and then Donald Tosh. And this is also significant. Is Donald Tosh was the script editor, John Wiles was the producer, and they were trying to edge Hartnell out. He's getting old, he's cantankerous, and they were trying to. So they were experimenting with different ways to see if the series could work without him. And that's why you get this Dr. Light episode, right? It's like, oh, what if Stephen were the main character, or what if it was another traveler or something like that? And so that's a little bit of the experiment that's going on here. But apparently, in writing the story, there was disagreement between Lucarati and Tosh. Tosh rewrote most of the scripts, and like I think Lucarati originally wrote it as the Doctor was in fact supposed to be impersonating the Abbot, and I think Donald Tosh took all that out and was just like, oh, they just happen to look the same. So that leads to what I think is the most interesting part about this story for me, because Stephen. I go back and forth on Stephen because you listen to it. He's a little annoying. He seems a little dim. Like he's just like every time he sees the Doctor, like, and he thinks the Doctor is posing as is in disguise as this person. He's just like, Doctor, what are you doing? Why are you in this weird disguise? And it's just like, hey, dude, if you think he's trying to do something like undercover, stop blurting out his name and demanding to have him explain. But that's what I think. To me, it's like it's like all the characters in this story are in this very rich, complicated historical costume drama, and Stephen thinks he's in a Doctor Who story. Right? Like everybody else is doing just normal stuff. And Stephen is like, well, obviously the Doctor has substituted himself as a duplicate of this Abbot for reasons passing understanding, and this must be some secret plot that the Doctor's involved in, and he's manipulating, and maybe aliens are going to invade it. It's like Stephen is just like, I'm in a Doctor Who story, and all the other characters are like, I'm in a very serious costume drama.
Right.
It's very and so I can't decide. Again, it's like I like Stephen, and this is Peter Purvis. His performance is very good, and the acting in this is very, very good. And there's a lot of very rich dialogue scenes, like similar to the Crusade that we listened to /watch/ talked about a couple weeks ago. But it's very jarring, and I'm all over the place on how I feel about it. And then yes, we do get the introduction of Dodo, who is it's a complete mess. Also, if you notice, we've had the arc. I think we've had a couple Dodo stories in the Gunfighters. We've done a few.
He's kind of like just hey, let's bring Susan back, but make her a little
she
better.
Looks a lot like Susan. But she comes in. If you notice in this one, she has a very strong. I think it's a what's it called, Manchester, Mancunian, whatever accent. She has a very strong accent that disappears, or maybe she's supposed to be Cockney. I don't know. Her accent changes dramatically from this story to the next, because I think they were like, no, don't do that, stop that. But yes, so the introduction of Dodo is why this is most notable. But yeah, this is an oddball story, to be sure.
Here we are, face to face, a couple of silver themes. That's all I got. Let's stop there.
Silver themes together, you and I. That was back when sitcom themes were great, and that had the guy and he was the rich guy with the toys. He had the train or something riding around his living room, and it had Ricky Schroeder, who used to creep me out.
Why?
I don't know. There's something about Ricky Schroeder used to
as a kid, or
yeah, as a kid. I was like, I don't know.
I didn't like when he was like, basically, I don't want my child actors to become adults. So then it's like he just became like some dude, like he was an adult. I was like, I don't want to see this guy.
Yeah, that's why I was so glad when they just shot Webster.
That's right. That's the best. It's for the best.
It's like Old Yeller. It was the end of Webster's, just exactly like Old Yeller, when George just took him out behind the barn and shot him.
We're adhering to the repeating themes here.
Emmanuel Lewis is still alive, everybody. I'm just
Is he? I don't know. I have no idea.
Actually,
he's probably has a podcast about MAGA or something at this point. Who knows? We like to look through the sands of time and see different concepts that are threaded to them, not unlike Emmanuel Lewis,
Yeah.
as who is both a concept threaded through
I
time,
was
but
just gonna
also
say, who
is
likes
a
to do that? Or okay.
well, yeah, he is threaded through time, and he also is a fellow traveler who is trying to find these things out. John, what themes did you want to look at for this episode?
So hang on. Now I just want to know if Emmanuel Lewis is still
All right, let's get a check. Mark Gatiss still gay? Yes.
Emmanuel Lewis height. He's
Emmanuel
52 years
Lewis.
old. Good for him.
Emmanuel
All
Lewis
right, still living.
is
Okay,
alive.
but
Living
I
in
didn't want.
Brooklyn. I could get him on the show.
Let's get him in. Let's get him. All right, but I'm sorry. I wanted to get that. I don't want that cloud hanging over the rest of the episode. If people
Yeah.
are listening at home and like, Emmanuel Lewis is dead. He's fine. Everybody, fine. And he would want to hear about the theme here, which is the companion as the lead. Now, we've talked a little bit about the role of the companion here, but obviously in the past, but this is we have Steven basically taking on the lead role, right? I mean, Steven, and actually I believe for the only time in the series history, episode 2 and 3 of the Massacre do not credit William Hartnell as the Doctor, because he doesn't appear. He appears as the Abbot, but the Doctor does not appear in the episode. And so this is one of the only times I think that the Doctor Who credit has not appeared in the credits of Doctor Who. Which
So
I
truly
think,
Dr. Light. He's
I mean, usually I think there was even there was a story that we'll get to soon. That's Mission to the Unknown, which is a weird thing where they had an extra episode basically, so they made this sort of one episode story. There was a prologue to a Dalek story that none of the regular cast appear in, or the TARDIS. It's just a storyline that leads into this big epic story. And even that had William Hartnell's name in the credits. It's like, it's still Doctor Who, like, so he's still the secret. So anyway, so Steven is the main character, and I think this connects with Clara too, right? Because she certainly has taken on an outsized role in Doctor Who.
Sure.
Although we're struggling with her right now in an interesting way as to sort of understanding her. But I mean, is the show better about the companions, or is the show better about the Doctor? Do you want it to be? Who's more interesting to you? And is it, if we were to follow the Doctor all the time, would that demystify him a little bit, or is it actually better that we see him through the companion's eyes, and just that the stories are all about them? Or is the show, it's Doctor Who, it's about the Doctor, and the companion's just bouncing it out of the thing?
I think it's good that it's a mix, and I think that's why the companions work well, and that they don't go too long without a companion. And even on the show episodes where he doesn't have a companion, like I think of those David Tennant specials, they basically bring in a one episode companion.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, but I do think the mix there of is the companion leading or is the Doctor leading has to really end up with the Doctor being at least 60-40, if not 70-30. But I think, like, again, my favorite season is that first one with Matt Smith and Amy, and Rory was a little less. It was really Amy. And I think it was a mix. Like, some episodes, Amy's plot really led.
Mm-hmm.
Some Matt Smith's plot really led. And it was probably closer to 60-40, but I don't think it could get much more than that. I think if the companion started to become the main, the Doctor's just kind of like, I'm here too, look at my screwdriver. I don't think that would work. So I think it has to be a mix, and it's probably better off to be, the Doctor is like, you're going to be interested in the Doctor's plot line because of his background. He is like saved the universe. He's this mythic figure. So if you go 90-10 Doctor, you're probably still fine.
Yeah.
But I think where it works best is when it is like 60-40, maybe 70-30, and that is really part of it. And that's why I'm describing, like, with Clara, there's been times where it's like, I don't know enough about what's going on. I think there are periods of Rose's plot line where it got to be like, okay, let's like move on from Rose. Like, she is not. And then that's why I think what becomes difficult with both Clara and Rose had these parts. I don't think Amy had this, where when they become part of some intergalactic universe level event, that kind of, it's like, that's not your role. Like, that, like, you can be very important to the Doctor, but I don't think you need to be a person. Like, that is what you are. So when you become Bad Wolf or whatever that is, it gets weird to me. Like, that's not who they are. Like, it's me.
They're not the epic figure. The Doctor is the epic hero figure. Yeah, it's kind of, and I think there's, a lot of the writers and stuff I've seen. So, for example, they say it's better to keep a distance from the Doctor, right? So Andrew Cartmel, who was the script editor during the seventh Doctor's era, Sylvester McCoy, he said the Doctor's like a mountain range off in the distance behind some clouds, and like he's sort of see him, but he's he's a little it's hazy,
Okay.
right? He's
Yeah.
like the distant. They actually, so a lot of the books and novelizations and stuff like that, one of the sort of style rules, in-house style rules, was you can't write from the Doctor's perspective. You can't be like, and then the Doctor thought, I wonder what like, it's like you have to, it's always the Doctor's very third person omniscient style versus any kind of getting in. You couldn't write inside the Doctor's head, which occasionally they would obviously drift away from that, but for the most part, they would avoid that. Similar kind of arguments, like he needs to be a little bit distant. Also, the Doctor's harder to have character arcs, although they are better with that in the new series. I think he does develop a little bit, or they.
Yeah, that's true, and the companions help there, where it's like, they're growing and learning. You know?
Growing and learning, and they can have an arc, right? A companion can have, and obviously a companion can die, a companion can get married off, a companion like something. A companion leaves the show.
But
so I guess
I thought the companions were just staying at a farm up in upstate.
They all live together in a big pen, wandering around. Yeah, and it's like, I know it's just this. Massacre's often cited as, all right, well, here's companion running the show, right? But even there, Steven is not great. He's sort of like, he spends the whole time looking for the Doctor. I do wish, the one part about that sort of annoyed me was like, the Doctor's like, look, I want to go talk to this guy, and like, you're cramping my style, dude. Just hang out here. You can wander around Paris, hang out in the TARDIS, hang out in the bar. Don't get in any trouble. I'll be fine. And the Doctor walks off. A grown person who's traveled the universe for who knows how many centuries walks out of the bar. As soon as he does, someone walks into the bar, looks at him kind of funny, and then turns around and walks out because he looks like the Abbot, I think. And Steven is immediately like, I've got to find the Doctor. And he's just like instantly like, now I've got to find him. And so the whole time, like, where is he? Where's my friend? I need him. It's like, and that bothered me a little because like, I don't know, just be, also use your head a little bit, Steven. Like you're also like, but the whole, the Doctor is the MacGuffin of the story, right? The whole story relies on him finding him, and it drives all the action that's going on. I mean, Steven is important in this story, but sort of in a hapless way, as like he's warns the Huguenots about what the Catholics are trying to do, and he sort of is the driver of a few of the events in a sense. But yeah, it's sort of like, yes, he's the main character in the sense that he has the most screen time. Is he really the protagonist taking on it? He's not really doing that. So maybe we haven't really seen one. The Doctor's still essential to the story, and you got to have it. But I don't know if you do. Well, we'll see maybe with these spin-offs that are, I mean, we've seen spin-off stories that are coming out through Big Finish and stuff, but maybe with these spin-offs that are coming out, they'll be like, well, can a companion drive the entire story? But well, actually, no, you see this in the Big Finish things, right? Is that you want to create stories in this universe, but as you're saying with the thing about the point about epic stories and stuff, like Rose can't defeat the Daleks, right? Like, I mean, if she did that, then it'd just be like, well, I guess anybody can. like so, or like they do the spin-off of Jago and Lightfoot from Talons of Wing Chang. And it's great. And they do have sort of monsters and ghosts and things from other dimensions and things like that appear in the stories. And they have to be very careful to be like, they sort of figure out what's happening, but they sometimes just accidentally blunder into a solution, or they can't just be like, oh, this is from another dimension. Like they can't be the Doctor.
Because if Clara and a Rose or whatever save the universe, then you're like, oh, so then
no big deal.
They weren't just like a random companion he came up to. This was like this super important person that, whereas that doesn't seem to be the nature of the companions. They seem to be, they're us. I mean, like they're along for the ride, and that's fun to watch, and you want to see how they're affected and changed. But and I think there's situations where the everyday person of them, it helps the Doctor save the universe. That's what we want to see. But I think if they become, Superman also, then it's like, well, then Superman's not that interesting anymore if everybody's there.
There's that was a discarded Marvel character or a DC character, was Superman also.
All right, how you doing, John? I'm checking in.
Good. We're doing well.
About the 1 hour mark.
Yeah.
Listen, there are 300 official Doctor Who television stories, and to be frank, it's getting a little much, I think. Although, wait, so when is the new one coming out? I ask every single time.
We just had a trailer drop, but by the time you listen to this episode, we're recording this in 2015. But by the time you listen to this episode, you will all know. So I can't give you any information.
We'll know when the date is.
You'll know the dates.
Okay.
Yeah, I imagine they'll by mid-October we'll have some sense of it.
So as of this recording, I can't like hold up a newspaper to show prove the time.
We have no idea. We only know that Emmanuel Lewis is alive and well and living in Brooklyn.
Again, as of the moment of this recording, we have ranked 178 of these. We're going to add 2 more, which will mean we'll have ranked 180 stories of Doctor Who, which is very exciting.
I can't fault your numbers.
I'm going to start here. The big 9-0. I ranked these 1 and 2. So there we go.
It was just faster. It was just easier.
Listen, I enjoyed it. It felt more like some of that Moffat magic, but felt a little disjointed and left me confused, which isn't bad. Like, I mean, you want to watch it again, but where some of the Moffat scripts really work well, or when you just watch, you're like, wow, that was great. I want to show that to other people. Be like, you should watch this show. Look at this. Whereas, like, I wouldn't do that with this episode. I would be like, oh, I'm interested. This is cool. But if you're walking in out of nowhere and you're taking off your hat and coat, I would be like, hey, watch this episode. You'd be like, I don't know what this is. So I ranked it relatively high, though. I ranked it 53 out of 180. Not too shabby. All right. Get off my back, Capaldi. Yeah. It's pretty good. All right. So that's that. And then the Massacre was really hurt for me, again, by the audio only.
It's a hard one.
But also, I didn't like the Stephen Led episode.
Yeah.
I actually liked the couple of bookend parts where the Doctor was still around much more. So I have it in the bottom half, not like in the basement or anything, but I have it 108.
Okay.
I have it. Oh, I should have mentioned the listen I have right next to actually The Crusade from last week, and right above Into the Dalek. They feel very of a piece to me. They're both like good so far Capaldi episodes. But the other one, the Massacre, I have just above the Wheel in Space, which I didn't mind as much as you, and just below Three Doctors, Journey to the Center of the TARDIS. So like, middling, a little bit on the lower half for me.
Yeah, I've got Listen a little bit higher. I've got Listen at number 33. I agree. It doesn't quite have.
I think you have it at 31, actually.
Oh, 31? I don't know how to read this chart.
Yeah, it's 31.
Okay, whatever. Oh, well, then that changes my analysis entirely. Okay. All right. I think it doesn't quite have the same Moffat magic as it. I think exactly as you're saying, right? Where at the end you're just like, oh wow, that all just came together in an incredibly satisfying way. I think it comes close, though. I think again that moment where she grabs his ankle under the bed is like really well done. I like what it's trying to say about the Doctor. You're right; it's a bit disjointed. You really have to pay attention to it, I think, and really, it does feel a bit disjointed. I like all the stuff with Clara and Danny's date. I thought was very good, and yeah, I mean, and then it's got some great individual scenes. That whole scene with Rupert. Pink is very good. So I've got that right around. What do I got that around? Doctor's Wife. Yeah, it's in my concept episodes, right? The Doctor's Wife, also a similar one where it was sort of like, oh, what's the this is sort of this interesting, weird concept kind of thingy.
School reunion, you have it just around.
Yeah, school reunion, which is so it's good. It's a solid episode. The Massacre a bit lower. I struggled with it, as I was listening to it. So I've heard it a few times now. It's not one, obviously. I listen to it every day, once a day, every morning on my commute to work. No, I've heard it a few times. It's not one you come back to very often because it's very rich and sort of heavy going. So I think I was, now I definitely remember listening to the first couple times and not having a clue what was going on. It is very hard to tell who's who. There are a lot of characters. It relies on, it seems like you need some historical knowledge to make it make sense. I think I hit on the, I'm not sure I'm 100%. I wanted Stephen to be a little bit smarter. It's like, dude, stop yelling the Doctor's name every time you see him. Maybe be cool for a second. You don't know what he's doing. I did hit upon sort of the idea, I think it was about halfway through, of being like, oh, it is like Stephen is just thinks he's in a Doctor Who episode and everybody else is in a Masterpiece Theater episode. that made it interesting to me, and it made me almost like like in the hands of Stephen Moffat or somebody, would that be more interesting? So I've got it at number 62, possibly, or possibly 60.
61.
61. There it is. I was around there, just above Ambassadors of Death, I think, and it's kind of in my it gets a lot of points because it's this great dialogue and great performances, and it's kind of like, it's the kind of thing that if I and I get this occasionally, it's like, if I want to be like, I'm going to be sophisticated and listen to sophisticated costume drama and feel like I'm very smart, I would definitely listen to that, right? It's also probably, I think I also did listen to it over 2 days, which helps
There you go.
to spread it out. So yeah,
Well, you have it in the.
Solid
I mean,
one.
that's the top third. You know, that's
solid. Because again, I think those performances it makes it solid for me. But it's
Well-
not as much fun as the Crusade, which is in a similar category, right? I didn't, when I was putting this all together, I didn't quite realize back to back I was going to have it be quite so too heavy historical first Doctors. Yeah,
audio, mainly audio, missing episodes. So Listen ends up tied at 32 from when we combine our scores together, like
I was
Voltron.
correct. You're
wrong.
correct.
It is tied with the Five Doctors 20th anniversary schedule, which I have ranked low and you have ranked very high. So that's why it ends up there. Just above The Doctor's Wife and Adventure in Time and Space. Interesting one is ranked up there. So then The Massacre have at 87. It's tied with Terror of the Autons, which is weird to me because then
those are very different stories.
Very different.
Although
actually, you know what? We just said they're very different, but you ranked them very similarly, and I ranked them very similarly. But anyway, just above Ghost Light, which I have no memory of.
That's the Seventh Doctor in the Haunted House with the evolution and
sounds terrible. I ranked it 134. So there we are. You can find these rankings on Mind.
Well, wait, I'll give you the Doctor Who magazine.
Yes, sorry, the magazine rankings.
So here's the magazine rankings. So until we get sued by Doctor Who magazine for reading these on the air,
and that's our hope. We would love to get some press on this.
Listen high up on number 12 out of 35 for the Peter Capaldi era. I think a generally pretty popular one with him. I think again, I think a lot of people thought the revealing the young Doctor might be controversial, but I think it was done in a way that liked.
Yeah.
And then The Massacre actually surprised me. The Massacre at number 11 out of 29 of the first Doctor, actually above the Crusade, above the Crusade, which we just listened to, which surprises me. And I don't know. So the one thing about the Doctor Who magazine is the survey is that you're supposed to just give each story you rank 1 out of 10, 10 being I love it, and you can give as many 10s as you want or whatever. And but they said, but if you don't have to rank ones that you've never watched, that wouldn't make any sense.
So
it's possible that few people have actually seen this one or ranked it, and so the only people that ranked it are the people who really liked it. So that may be driving up the numbers.
I also wonder if a lot of people, it was missing, and then they finally could watch some of it, and so it's like, oh, this is so cool! I got to see it,
Well, here, The Massacre there's no video.
Hear it, sorry,
yeah.
But I just mean
it is very
the
lost.
allure of like a missing thing.
And it's one I think it's one, again, we're all Doctor Who fans are heavily influenced by the few reference books that were out there, and for a long time this one was talked up as like, oh yes, this William Hartnell gives a really stunning performance as the Abbot, and it's like, well, he only has like 4 lines. I don't really know what so there's also a little bit of like, yes, this was a great chance for William Hartnell to really flex his acting chops in the 5 lines that he had. So there you go. Now you can tell them where the
interesting. Well, none of that. Well, I'm glad you said that because none of that is on my.
None of that is available.
You got to get that here on the podcast.
You get that. Yeah, you got to get that straight from the horse's mouth.
But if you want to see our rankings, you can go to mindprobe.show.
Do it. Why
our website? You can, of course, you can subscribe to us on the website. You can subscribe to us Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're not
all those places.
If you're not watching on video right now, we're on video on YouTube. Also, you can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and watch it there. Basically, the last 15 or so episodes are on YouTube. Yeah. And we will.
Because we didn't want to do any until we got really humming with this. So we waited about 75 episodes, and then I said to Porter one night, I was like, "Hey, I think we got this down." And then
pivoted
the computer crashed.
Yeah. So you can see that. We'd love it if you subscribe on those places. We'd also love if you would give a rating on the iTunes
Do
store
it.
or give a
A good
thumbs
one,
up on
preferably.
YouTube. We would love that.
Or just give it a thumbs up while you're listening to it.
Yeah, I'm
Just
sure.
stick your thumb up, and then people around you are going to be like, "Why is your thumb in the air?" And you're like, "Because I am loving this podcast."
And then you'll have to tell them about mindprobe.show and they'll subscribe. And
You're
please
like, "I
do
love
so.
being probed," and they're going to be like, "Wait, what?"
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Say that.
Use
Say
that exact phrasing.
I love being probed.
Please do tell friends about the show who you think might be interested in.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a friend who likes Doctor Who. Maybe you like Doctor Who and you have a friend like I was 3 years ago who you've been begging to watch Doctor Who. Well, you can be like, "This Is Us." And then you're like, "Wait, the show This Is Us? You think we want to watch that together?" Like, no. And then you know what? You'll talk as people finally. And that friend of yours who, we're always looking at our phones, right?
Yeah.
So let's
look at other people on YouTube.
And also, let's listen to the podcast on your phone.
With each other. Yeah. I was going to say
all that. John agrees with all that.
It was going to be really witty, and I completely forgot what it was. But yeah.
You can also email us, Porter at mindprobe.show, John at mindprobe.show.
Do that as well.
You don't email us, but you could.
You could. That option is out there.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't checked that email in months. So it's like Schrodinger's email. You may have emailed us, but we just don't know.
Schrodinger's email. What do we have in store for next episode?
Well, I hope you know what. If you like heists, if you like a caper, are you interested in a caper, Porter?
Sure.
Because we got some capers coming up in the next storyline. Thankfully, I did not have to reach quite as far back in the Obscure Connections archives for this one. Yeah, the next Peter Capaldi, Jenna Coleman story, the 12th Doctor in Time Heist, where they're trying to rob a bank vault, basically. Fun little Ocean's 11-y kind of thing, but not with they couldn't afford 11, so it's like an Ocean's like 5.
Yeah,
and also, but George Clooney, man, you can't keep that man away from anything. Yeah, so going off the sort of heists, con artist thing, I've paired that with a 4th Doctor. I'm sorry, I was hoping for another lengthy black and white audio only adventure for you. But unfortunately, had to go with a 4th Doctor Romana story. First Romana, the Rebos operation. Yeah.
Well, John, I'll watch those.
You will. I think you should.
I will. I'll do it. I mean, I've committed.
It's a good 4-parter. It's a nice one, and it's a little palate cleanser because we're going to go right back into the Hartnell black and white ones after that. But don't worry, all on video.
I don't mind the Hartnell black and white ones. It's really the 6th and 7th Doctor who test me.
Yeah, our Doctor Who group just watched the 6th Doctor one, and we were all just like, yeah. Well, there that is.
Mindprobe.show.